East African leadership strongly opposing youth-led protests in rejection of the oppressive rule. Trump says he will send his troops, guns a-blazing, into Nigeria to curb the ongoing Christian massacre. Amidst the rise of cyber threats, is your data really safe? Within the EAC member states, a hidden conflict ensues. TV newsroom, and we welcome all our viewers from Kenya and the rest of the world. I am Elsie Zawadi, and I will be with you for the next 25 minutes. This is the Pointer News, and thank you for joining us. Be sure to join the conversation live on our social media handle, that is X @Central TV, using the hashtag #ThePointerNewsKE. First, we begin by turning our eyes to a troubling pattern playing out across East Africa. A generational rift between long-standing ruling elites and an angry mobile youth movement. For the past year, mass youth-led protests have erupted in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And in each case, the state's response has been harsh, often violent. Sidi Omari with more on this news.
These protests share a common thread: young people pushing back against policies and practices they say shut them out of power, and government answering with force rather than dialogue. In Kenya, the hashtag Reject Finance Bill uprising in June 2024, led largely by youth using social media to organize, escalated into widespread clashes with security forces. Rights groups and local monitors reported dozens of deaths and hundreds injured during the heat of the protests. The incidents prompted national conciliation and a review by law firms and human rights bodies. Across the border in Uganda, young people mobilized in June 2024 to demand accountability over corruption allegations targeting leaders in parliament, including the speaker. Police moved to prevent protests around parliament, and rights groups recorded dozens of arrests during demonstrations. And in Tanzania, an explosive mix of a contested election where the current president was declared the winning candidate with a nearly 98% vote share after key opposition figures were barred, sparking countrywide demonstrations. The crackdown that followed included mass arrests and treason charges against dozens, actions which have prompted an announced government inquiry and concern from international watchdogs.
I think it's unfair what the government is doing, basically, because there are things called rights and there's something called constitution, which everybody should follow it to the latter. So when we see the police coming in to brutalize people and criminalize them as if they're doing a wrong thing, and we're representing each other, sometimes it doesn't make sense. And there's a very thin path between professionalism and also vandalizing people and also discriminating people and hurting people at the same time.
What unites these countries is not just the anger of the youth, it's how state power has been used. Mass arrests, court cases that include severe charges such as treason, and in some instances, lethal force or disappearances reported by civil society.
We are now joined live by our correspondent CD. Now, CD, these protests may be separate in place, but they feel connected in spirit. When you look across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, what stands out most about how these states are responding to youth led dissent?
Elsie, the pattern is striking. In each case, young people have used peaceful assembly and digital platforms to push back against policies they see as exclusionary or unaccountable. But instead of engagement, the primary response has been policing, heavy deployments, mass arrests, and in some instances, deadly force.
And the numbers you're seeing, arrests, injuries, and even disappearances, they are raising serious questions about rights and accountability, aren't they?
They are. In Kenya, rights commissions and civil society have documented dozens of deaths, hundreds of injuries, and large-scale arrests linked to the financial bill protests. In Uganda, while the death toll is lower, the use of preemptive arrests and detentions has drawn concern. And in Tanzania, the scale of the crackdown, including treason charges, has alarmed both local and international watchdogs.
Governments, of course, argue that they're maintaining law and order. Supporters say strong measures are necessary to prevent chaos. How do rights groups respond to that?
Rights groups say security cannot come at the cost of fundamental freedoms. They argue that protest, even when disruptive, is a legitimate democratic tool and that using excessive force or charges like treason risks criminalizing dissent rather than addressing its root causes.
So where does this leave the region?
Crossroads, Elsie, governments can double down on force or they can open space for dialogue, reform, and political inclusion. What happens next may define the relationship between the state and a new generation that is informed, connected, and unwilling to be silent.
Thank you for joining in, CD.
Thank you for having me.
We are now joined live by a political analyst. Thank you for joining us. What reforms would meaningfully reduce confrontation between police and demonstrators?
First of all, what we need to do is to encourage police and the state in East Africa to know that they are not doing the young people a favor. They are not doing the young people, they are not giving them anything that they don't deserve. In other words, their rights to picket, their rights to protest, their rights to peaceably assemble, and their right to express themselves is a right that is not given by the state. It's inalienable. It is within the international conventions on human rights. It's within their constitutions and so on, like in Kenya, Tanzania, and so on. Every Kenyan, every Tanzanian, every East African has a right to express themselves, to demonstrate, to participate in political affairs. So what we need is governments and state parties that understand that they exist to serve, they exist to protect, and not to kill, and not to maim, and not to disrupt, and not to stop the youth from holding them to account, asking them to demonstrate their willingness to be accountable.
How do contested election environments influence the state's response to protests?
First of all, elections are supposed to be free and fair, and that anybody who wants to run for elections should have the opportunity to run for elections. So when the elections become contested, they become contested when a government in power or a person in power decides to undermine, decides to destroy other political parties or to destroy the opposition by way of arrests, by way of false charges, and so on. When a person in power seeking to defend their position begins to use unfair means, it leads to contested elections. Now, what we are saying is that contested elections come because some wrongs are being done, some injustices are being committed. So the first thing we should do is let's make sure elections are free and fair. Let's make sure that when elections come, there is a quest for justice, not quest for injustice. There's a reason to let people vote, not to suppress their vote.
What should regional bodies like the EAC be doing at this moment?
The ideal is that regional bodies are supposed to offer some kind of policing on the regional states. The reality is that they don't do it. These bodies, SADC, ESC, AU, don't do it because the top at the apex of these organizations are these very brothers and sisters of theirs. And when they come together, they choose to agree more than they choose to disagree. They choose to fear to interfere or to intervene in each other's territory because they don't want to be seen to be taking sides. So that fear makes these presidents go and challenge, go without them being called to order by their peers. So what we would want is that these bodies should be able to be fair, they should be able to be effective, and they should be able to ensure that their members are called to order whenever there's reasons to so do. There's need for AU or ESC to sanction Tanzania. They don't do it. There's reason for ESCC or IGAD or AU to sanction Uganda or sanction DRC or sanction even Rwanda or even Kenya. But they don't do it because they're just busy trying to say these are our brothers and therefore allowing them to just trample on the rights of their own people and trample on their freedoms of their own citizens.
Thank you for your insights, Dr. Martin. Now, there is a debate rising over violence in Nigeria, and it is taking on global political dimensions. While human rights groups warn that Nigerians are facing deadly attacks from armed groups, especially those that live on the northern side. The US president has made sweeping claims of a Christian massacre, insisting that America may deploy troops if the killing continues. The Nigerian government, however, maintains that the situation, though grave, is far more complex than a single religious narrative. Marion Dichu with more news.
For years, communities in northern and central Nigeria have endured repeated attacks from armed militias, criminal bandits, and extremist groups. Entire villages have been displaced, farms destroyed, and families uprooted. Human rights monitors say the violence is driven by a mix of resource conflicts, criminal networks, and long-standing tensions between herd and farming communities, leaving thousands of civilians vulnerable. But the picture becomes more complicated when viewed through an international lens. President Donald Trump has publicly accused the Nigerian government of allowing what he calls a genocide against Christians, even suggesting that the United States could intervene militarily. His comments have intensified debate both in Washington and across Africa.
It's going to demobilize the Nigerian government because Trump coming in is basically showing that to the world, the Nigerian government is now publicly incapable of handling and taking care of their own citizens, so much that someone else has to come and govern on their behalf.
Nigeria rejects the genocide label, saying the violence affects people of all faiths and identities. Officials insist that attacks are not state-sponsored, nor are they a target extermination of one religious group. Abuja argues that the crisis is rooted in criminality, climate-driven migration, and widespread insecurities, and warned that foreign military intervention would only inflame tensions.
Initially, Boko means education and haram means taboo, so it was against education. And then from it being against education, it became against religion. From it being against religion, it just said, we'll kill everybody.
Meanwhile, analysts point out that while Christian communities have suffered significant losses, Muslim communities have also experienced deadly insurgent attacks and widespread displacement. The reality on the ground, they say, is multi-layered and not easily reduced to religious fault lines. As both governments trade contradicting narratives, one question remains: who defines a genocide and who acts when violence crosses borders? Under both international law and the US constitutional limits, a unilateral deployment of American troops into Nigeria without the consent of Abuja or without approval of Congress would be illegal. Nigeria has not declared a state of religious genocide, and Washington has provided no verified evidence to support claims of a so-called Christian massacre. Hence, raising a much bigger question, is President Trump pushing humanitarian concern or overstepping the law? For now, both governments remain firm that no foreign troops will step into Nigerian territory without due process. Marion Dichu, The Pointer News.
We are now joined live by a specialist in matters international law. Thank you for joining us. Under international law, what legal thresholds must be met before violence is classified as genocide?
First of all, we need to understand that there is a crime called genocide in international law under the Rome Statute that establishes the International Criminal Court in The Hague, and therefore genocide is top on that list. There are certain conditions that must be met before genocide is declared. Number one, not all murders, not all killings of any kind amount to genocide, but a killing that is specific. It is well intended and well executed to target a certain group of people, to target a certain race, to target a certain tribe of people, or to target a certain class of people. In other words, an intention to exterminate, an intention to kill, an intention to harm, and an intention to destroy a whole group of people, a race, a tribe.
Can a US president legally deploy troops to another sovereign state without its consent?
War is no longer justifiable. You can never justify. And a war between a country and a country can only justify on account of aggression. That country has been aggressive to you and you are retaliating, you are responding. Now, where in Nigeria have US citizens been targeted? And even if they are being targeted inside the US, repatriate, withdraw them from Nigeria. But you can't use a reason like that to attack a country. So there is no place. And even if that were to be the case, the president of US will require Congress, will require his own legislature to approve such an action to go and deploy soldiers in another country. Secondly, or thirdly, there is no enough evidence to show that the Americans themselves care enough about genocide. For example, what have they done about allegations of genocide in Israel? So what is it that now they think they can do more about genocide in Nigeria? So that begs the question. And then related to that, the US government has never signed up to the ICC statute that establishes the ICC code, the Rome statute that establishes the ICC. So this issue of genocide, internationally, the US has not agreed to it. Therefore, they cannot claim that genocide is happening and therefore they want to intervene. That would be what you call an oxymoron. It will be a contradiction.
What role do multilateral bodies like the United Nations play in authorizing or preventing such interventions?
Let us get it right that the intentions of the multilateral organizations, the UN organizations, in terms of protecting human rights, in terms of the UN Council on Security, are very good and are very clear, because they really intend to ensure that there's no war, and even if there's war, if human beings don't suffer. Their intentions and their actions are different. Different because most of the time, the issues that come, they come in spite of. So, and some of the aggressors are members of the UN Security Council, like the US, like Russia, like China. They are some of the aggressors and some of the abusers of this rights issue. So, the international community and international institutions have a long way to go to ensure that they become the real guardians of human rights, the real guardians of security.
Thank you for your contribution, Dr. Coming up next, we shall discuss matters data and safety. Stay tuned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, seeing that there is a rise in cyber threats and crimes in Kenya, data has never been more accessible to this magnitude. Its theft has never been made easier like it is now. With over 4.5 billion cyber threats documented in the first quarter of this year alone, it begs the question, how safe is your data? Ray Kahi with more news.
Data has never been easier to steal. From contact information, photos posted to social media, private photos, medical records, and even bank statements, all these can be obtained illegally with ease. Some do not require much strain to acquire, while others need advanced technology. With the Kenyan cyberspace evolving at quite the speedy rate, cybercriminals are getting their hands on these technologies, hence the rise in data breaches and theft. Experts warn that many Kenyans remain unaware of just how exposed their personal information can be. Simple actions like clicking unknown links, using weak passwords, or sharing too much information online can open the door to cybercriminals.
Now more than ever is when cybersecurity is needed. Kenyans and mostly everyone should be more aware on how to protect themselves against these data breaches, because the resources are there are ways there, you cannot tell somebody not to pass. So as users of the internet and consumers of data and users of data, we have to also know how to protect ourselves from the threats that arise in the new and emerging threat landscape.
As more services move online, from banking to healthcare, the risk grows for individuals and institutions alike. Authorities are now urging the public to take data protection seriously. This includes enabling two-factor authentication, regular updating software, and being cautious when sharing personal information online. The government, on its part, says it is working to strengthen cyber laws and improve digital safety frameworks.
Data has never been easier to steal. From unsecured public Wi-Fi to weak passwords and overshared personal details online, cyber criminals are exploiting every small gap we leave open. Experts say that Kenyans must now treat their data the same way they treat their money. Protect it, guard it, and think twice before handing it over. Because in today's digital world, your information is currency, and losing it can cost far more than people realize. My name is Ray Kahi, and this is the Pointer News.
We are now joined live by a data scientist. Thank you for joining us and kindly introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Faith. I am a data scientist by profession. Glad to be here. Data is basically bodies of information. It could be structured or unstructured. Structured data is what you find in an Excel sheet, in a table that is neat, has units, and stuff like that. And then there's also unstructured data, which is like photos, videos, your Instagram profile. Then there's something. There is also, for example, when you're on Netflix and you're scrolling and you click on something. So your behavioral patterns, what informs your algorithms is also data. There's a lot that data is.
What are some of the ways data can be stolen?
How people steal it is perhaps by social engineering, where they'll call you and tell you to give them some sort of information, for example, your pins, and ask you to send them money, things like that. That's what we call social engineering. And then there is phishing, which is how they send a link to you, and then when you click on the link, you enter and they steal your data. There are so many other ways. Perhaps sometimes you post content that has vital information and then someone picks it from you. That one, they didn't really have to go so far as to steal. You already gave it yourself. So there's so many ways that data can be put unsafely and then someone can get it from you. Yeah.
And finally, what can Kenyans do to safeguard their data?
First of all, keep your password safely. That's something that's very important. Sometimes people, the only thing they need is to access your password, and then they'll access everything else. So if you've written it in a notebook and you carry the notebook everywhere and someone steals that notebook, they're gonna find your passwords. That's one. Just secure your passwords. Ensure that no one else has access to them. Don't give out your M-Pesa password, things like that. There's also another one where you post only information that cannot be stolen from you. First of all, don't put your data that is very unique to you, for example, your ID, your passport number, and things like that online, because that one might be all someone needs to get your credit cards and things like that to steal from you. And they might also actually use that to commit other frauds like stealing your identity. Another one is don't click links you don't know. If you don't know where this link is directing you to, don't click it. And there are those links that are sent where they tell you that there's a sponsorship, or there is a MasterCard Foundation is offering something. Click on this link, or if you need to talk to me, click on this WhatsApp link. A lot of people, by the way, have had their WhatsApps hacked through links that are sent to them. So don't click links, any links. Don't be curious. You should be careful with is, I think I'll just go back to the first one. Keep your important documents with you always. Yeah, people don't need to know your ID number. They don't need to know you. They don't need to carry your ID. Why? Yeah, I think I could say that.
Thank you for your time, Faith. We now turn our focus to the gaps in East Africa's legal frameworks. With Kenya at the center of these tensions, questions are emerging about whether the East African community is adequately protecting human rights and the rule of law, and what this means for regional integration. Although countries like Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania have strong constitutional guarantees, observers note that actors sometimes abuse them, undermining Article 6D of the EAC Treaty on Good Governance, Democracy, and Respect for Human Rights. Recent incidents show that Kenyan human rights defenders deported across borders and activists from Kenya and Uganda wrongfully arrested or abducted while monitoring cross-border issues. Gaps in the enforcement has affected trust between member states, threatening regional integration, raising the question if the EAC can be sustained when legal frameworks fail to protect individual rights across borders. Catherine Mbithe with more details.
While the EAC Treaty sets a clear standard for good governance and human rights in Article 6D, national practices often fall short of this treaty. Enforcement mechanisms remain weak, meaning rights violations such as deportations or abductions have consequences that are shaking regional integrity. This violation undermines public confidence in the rule of law and threatens the shared goals of the unity and mutual trust. As these gaps persist, the promise of regional integration risks become more rhetorical than real. When member states disregard shared legal commitments, they weaken not only their own institution but also collectively authority of at least African community as a whole. Citizens begin to question whether regional framework exists to protect them or merely to serve political convenience. The erosion of trust has long-term consequences, discouraging cross-border cooperation, economic mobility, and civic participation. For the EAC to remain credible, its principles must be matched by action. This requires strengthened regional oversight bodies, empowering courts to hold states accountable, and ensuring that violations of fundamental rights are met with clear and consistent consequences. empowering courts to hold states accountable, and ensuring that violations of fundamental rights are met with clear and consistent consequences. Political will is essential, but so is public pressure from civic society, the media, and regional institutions committed to transparency and justice. Ultimately, respect for human rights is not a secondary concern to integration. It is its foundation. Without accountability, unity becomes fragile. But with genuine commitment to the rule of law, the EAC can move beyond declarations and build community grounded in trust, dignity, and shared responsibility.
Now you're up to speed with what is happening around you and elsewhere in the world. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Elsie Zawadi, and this is the Pointer News.